It was supposed to be a simple visit. I had just landed my first job, found my own apartment, and was finally stepping into the life I'd always dreamed of. But when I returned home to visit my parents, I found the house empty. No furniture, no memories, just an abandoned space that once held my entire world. The worst part, they were gone. Without a word, without a trace. They had sold everything and moved across the country, leaving me behind with nothing but questions and an unbearable silence. What had I done wrong? What secret had they been hiding from me all along? Hi, my name is Nora. The door slammed behind me with a force that echoed through the hollow halls. The keys to my new apartment, the same ones that had felt like a symbol of freedom just days before, now seemed like a cruel reminder of the distance between me and everything I once knew. My first real job, my first real taste of independence. All of it had been thrilling, empowering. I had made it. At least that was what I had told myself as I stood in front of my parents' house. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I had driven the familiar route home to visit. I was excited to share stories about the job, about my new life, the small victories, the challenges that were shaping my days. I had imagined the laughter we would share at the dinner table, the warmth of my mother's voice, the proud look in my father's eye. I had anticipated it all in a way that felt almost comforting. I needed it. But as I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The house, our house, stood in front of me, quiet and unwelcoming. The lawn, usually meticulously cared for by my father, had grown wild, the grass taller than it had ever been. The familiar swing set, where I used to sit for hours with my sister, was now abandoned, its chains swaying in the wind like the ghost of a time long past. But it wasn't just the unkempt yard that struck me, it was the absence. The air felt empty, hollow, as if the house itself had exhaled and forgotten to take another breath. I stepped out of the car, my heart racing with a growing unease. I had seen the house many times before, but today it felt foreign, like a stranger's home. I approached the front door, the same door I had walked through countless times as a child, as a teenager, even as an adult. My hand reached for the knob, and the familiar chill of the metal sent a shiver down my spine. The door opened, but instead of the usual warmth, all I felt was a cold draft that sent a rush of confusion through my mind. Inside, the house was unrecognizable. The furniture was gone, the walls were bare, the pictures that had once lined the hallway were missing, and the smell of home, the smell of my mother's cooking, the faint hint of my father's old cologne, was replaced by something stale, something unfamiliar. I walked through the living room, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. I called out for my parents, expecting the sound of my mother's voice, or the soft shuffle of my father's footsteps. But all I heard was the silence. It was then that I noticed the note taped to the kitchen counter, a single piece of paper, folded neatly in half. My hands trembled as I approached, almost unwilling to read the words that might change everything. Nora, we've decided to move. We'll be in Arizona. The house is sold. We're sorry we didn't tell you sooner. Love, Mom and Dad. The words blurred as my vision became clouded by the sting of disbelief. Arizona. They had sold the house where I had spent my entire life, where my childhood was stored in the creaking floorboards and the worn-out furniture, where my mother had spent years baking cookies and my father had paced back and forth, worrying about the future. Gone. All of it. I stared at the paper in my hands, for what felt like an eternity, unable to process the weight of what I had just read. My mind screamed for answers, for any explanation that could make sense of what my parents had done. But the silence of the house mocked me. There was no explanation, no apology, no reason. I stood there, frozen, as the coldness of their absence seeped deeper into my bones. I thought I had been prepared for this. After all, I was an adult now. But nothing could have prepared me for the shock, the sting of betrayal, the overwhelming emptiness that settled in the pit of my stomach. The home I had known, the family I had trusted, was gone, and I was left standing in the wreckage, with nothing but a note and an unbearable silence. The days after that visit were a blur. I didn't know what to do with myself. The apartment I had once been so proud of now felt like a cave. I couldn't bring myself to unpack most of my things, leaving boxes stacked in corners as reminders of the life I had left behind, the life that no longer seemed to exist. I called them over and over again, but the calls went unanswered. Each time the phone rang, I felt the familiar sting of rejection. It was as if they had disappeared entirely, leaving no trace behind except for that damn note. Arizona, the word echoed in my mind, mocking. I had been the first to leave home, the first to spread my wings, and now they were gone before I could even say goodbye. I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone. How could I explain this to my friends, to my coworkers? They had seen me in my excitement, heard my stories about how I was making it on my own. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that my family, the people who had been everything to me, had erased themselves from my life without so much as a goodbye. I tried to keep my mind occupied. Work, errands, anything to stop thinking about the house, about them. But every time I came back to my apartment, the silence settled in again, suffocating me. There was no one to talk to, no one to share my day with, to ask about theirs, to laugh with. It was just me, alone. The isolation weighed on me, heavier than I ever expected. I didn't want to feel this way. I didn't want to admit how much I needed them, how much I had relied on their presence in my life, even if I had thought I was fine without them. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I drove to the old neighborhood again. The house was still empty, the lawn still overgrown. I parked down the street, watching from a distance as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the vacant house. I felt the pull to go inside again, to search for something I had missed, but deep down, I knew there was nothing left to find. They had made their decision, and I had been left behind. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out, hoping for some sign of. It was a text message from my sister, Lucy. Nora, where are you? I've been trying to reach you. Please call me. I stared at the message for a long time. Lucy, she had to know something. I had always been close to her. She had been the one person I could always count on. But now, even her message seemed distant, like a lifeline that I wasn't sure I could reach. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over the screen. What would I say? How could I explain the mess I was in? The family I had once known, the people I thought I could trust, had betrayed me. They had left without a word. I couldn't even get them on the phone. I finally typed a response. I don't know where they are, Lucy. They sold the house. They're gone. I hit send and stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. The message felt like a confession, like I was admitting to some unspeakable truth. The waiting was unbearable, each second dragging on, as I wondered what she would say next. Minutes passed, then hours, and there was no reply. The silence felt deafening, a cruel reminder that I was truly alone. I had no idea what had happened to my family. I had no idea why they had chosen this path, why they had left without a word. But as I sat there, in the darkness, watching the house I had grown up in fade into the shadows, I knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. The next few days felt like a slow unraveling. I threw myself into work, keeping my focus sharp, but my mind was never fully there. Every task, every conversation, was just a distraction. I found myself looking at the door to my apartment, waiting for them to come back, to explain themselves, to tell me it was all a mistake. But each time the door stayed shut, the silence stretched further into my bones. I couldn't go on like this, so I did the only thing I could think of. I called Lucy again. This time, she picked up. "Hey," she said, her voice strained, as if she had been waiting for this call too. "Lucy, I need to know what happened," I said, my words tumbling out faster than I intended. "Why didn't you tell me they were leaving? Why didn't anyone tell me?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her struggling with her words, unsure of how to navigate the conversation. Finally, she spoke. "Because I didn't know, Nora. None of us knew." I felt my heart skip a beat. "What do you mean? They sold the house. They left. How could you not know?" "I found out the same way you did," she continued, her voice tight with emotion. "The house was sold, and they told me they were moving. They didn't ask me to go with them. They didn't even tell me where they were going. At first, I just thought they were going on a vacation or something. But then the movers came and everything was gone." "Did they say why?" I asked, the question hanging between us like a fragile thread. Lucy let out a shaky breath. No, they didn't say why, and they won't return my calls either. I could feel my blood pressure rising, the frustration bubbling up to the surface. I don't understand. How could they do this without telling us anything? How could they just disappear like that? I wish I knew, Lucy replied, her voice filled with a mixture of confusion and sadness. It's like they just made a decision, packed up and left. It doesn't make sense. Not after everything we've been through together. The words lingered in the air. We both knew there was something bigger at play here, something we weren't being told. The silence, the distance, the sudden move, it was all part of something I couldn't understand. I was desperate for answers, but all I had were more questions. Do you have any idea where they went? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Lucy paused for a moment. I have a few ideas. They mentioned Arizona once, but they didn't give any details. I've tried looking for them online, but nothing's showing up. It's like they've disappeared off the face of the earth. I felt the air leave my lungs. Arizona, that was all I had to go on. And yet, it felt like the weakest lead in the world. Lucy, what if we went there? I said, my mind racing with possibilities. What if we just went to Arizona and found them? Maybe they'll talk to us there. Maybe we can figure this out. I don't know, Nora, she replied hesitantly, but if they wanted us to know, wouldn't they have told us? Wouldn't they have let us in on whatever is happening? Her words hit me like a brick. What if they didn't want us to know? What if there was something so deep, so dark, that they couldn't risk us finding out? The weight of that thought sent a chill down my spine. What were they hiding? I spent the rest of the evening searching for any trace of my parents. I combed through social media, old emails, and even distant relatives, but all I found were dead ends. No new addresses, no signs of where they might have gone. I tried calling every number I could think of, but each call went unanswered, each voicemail full of my own desperation. It was like they had erased themselves completely, leaving me with nothing but fragments of a family that no longer existed. The emptiness of their departure began to consume me. I had always prided myself on being independent, on standing on my own 2 feet, but this was a betrayal unlike any other. They had cut me off without explanation, without warning, and left me in a world that felt colder and more alien by the day. I couldn't keep going like this. I couldn't live in this suspended state of confusion, waiting for answers that might never come. Something had to give, but as the night wore on, and the weight of my parents' disappearance settled over me, I realized that whatever was going on, whatever secret they were hiding, was bigger than I could have ever imagined, and I was about to find out just how far they were willing to go to protect it. The following week felt like a blur of restless nights and fruitless days. I barely slept, too consumed by the mystery that had swallowed my family whole. Each morning, I woke up with the same feeling, like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to leap into the unknown or retreat into the comfort of ignorance. I didn't know what I was searching for, but I knew I couldn't stop until I found it, until I found them. Lucy and I had exchanged texts, sporadic and tinged with a sense of helplessness. She was more resigned than I was, as if she had already accepted that there was no way to undo what had been done. But I couldn't let it go. I needed to understand why. Why had they left without a word? Why had they hidden this from us? And why was I the last to know? I spent every spare moment calling every number I could find. I reached out to family friends, to people who used to visit our house. I even called the movers who had cleared out our belongings, hoping they might have some information, some detail I had missed. But everyone was as clueless as I was. It was like my parents had vanished into thin air. One evening, as I sat at my kitchen table, sifting through the scattered papers and old photographs that now cluttered my apartment, I received a message from Lucy. She had found something. I looked through Dad's old record. There's a bank statement showing a withdrawal for moving expenses, paid to a company in Arizona. I'm going to look into it. Call me later. My heart raced as I read her message. Arizona, the same place they had mentioned so briefly before. I had never been to Arizona, but now it felt like the one thread I could cling to. I immediately dialed her number, the phone ringing in my ear with an urgency I couldn't ignore. Lucy, what did you find? I asked as soon as she picked up. I'm not sure yet, she replied, her voice tinged with caution. But it's a lead. This company, they specialize in relocating people. It's a long shot, but I'm calling them tomorrow. They might have details on where they went, or at least some kind of paperwork. I felt a mix of hope and fear churn in my stomach. This was it. This could be the breakthrough I had been waiting for, or it could be another dead end. Either way, I wasn't ready to back down. I'll go with you, I said. Before I could even think it through, let's go together. We can find them. We can make them tell us what's going on. There was a long pause before Lucy spoke. Okay, but if we find out something we're not ready for, Nora, I know, I interrupted, my voice more confident than I felt. But we have to know. I can't just sit here anymore. The next morning, we were on our way. We drove in silence, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. I didn't know what I expected to find. What could we uncover that would explain why they left? What could possibly justify cutting us off like this? As we neared the address Lucy had found, I felt the familiar weight of anxiety settling in. The neighborhood was quiet, with small houses lined up on either side of the road. There was nothing about it that screamed mystery, but I knew better than to assume. I had learned that there were no simple answers anymore. We pulled into the parking lot of a small, nondescript office building. A sign hung outside, barely noticeable, reading Westward Relocation Services. The building itself looked ordinary, almost forgot, but the questions inside it were anything but. We walked into the building, and a woman at the front desk looked up, her expression polite but distant. "Can I help you?" she asked. Lucy stepped forward. "Hi, we're looking for some information about a move. Well, about a family that used your services." The woman raised an eyebrow but didn't seem surprised. "We get a lot of inquiries like that. Do you have any details? A name or reference number?" I felt my heart pounding in my chest as Lucy fumbled for the papers she had brought. She handed the woman a copy of the bank statement with the company's name and withdrawal details. The woman glanced at it, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took it in. "Let me check something for you," she said, standing up and walking into a back office. Lucy and I stood there, waiting, both of us tense with anticipation. The minutes dragged on, each second feeling like it stretched longer than the last. I had never felt so powerless, so exposed. What was I expecting from this? What would they tell us if they had anything at all? Finally, the woman returned, holding a folder in her hands. "We don't usually share client information, but given your circumstances, I'm willing to make an exception. This move was unusual." My heart skipped a beat. What did she mean by unusual? "They didn't just move," the woman continued, her voice low. "They were relocating to start a new life. They weren't planning on telling anyone." I leaned forward, my mind raced. "What do you mean? They weren't planning on telling anyone? They didn't just leave for a job or a new home. They left to disappear," she said, almost as if she was speaking to herself. "They made it very clear they didn't want to be found." The words hung in the air like a weight pressing down on me. They had left to disappear? What could possibly be so big, so dangerous, that my parents would go to such lengths to hide it from us, to hide from the people they had known their entire lives? The woman handed us the folder and I opened it with trembling hands. Inside there were documents, official relocation forms, legal papers, and something that caught my eye. A name I didn't recognize. "This is the person they were working with," the woman said. "It's all I can give you." I stared at the name, feeling a chill run down my spine. This was the lead I had been waiting for, but it wasn't what I expected. The truth was darker than I had ever imagined. I held the folder in my hands like it was a fragile ticking bomb. The name on the paper burned into my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to speak it out loud. The silence in the room felt suffocating as I stared at the unfamiliar name, trying to piece together the significance of. Lucy stood beside me, her breath shallow, her hand clenched tightly around the edge of the counter as if she was afraid to let go. I could feel the tension between us, the unsaid words, the overwhelming realization that what we were about to uncover could change everything. The woman at the desk had already told us more than she should have. She had opened a door we weren't prepared to walk through. "Who is this?" Lucy finally whispered, her voice barely a breath. I didn't answer right away. My mind raced, trying to connect dots that seemed so distant, yet suddenly so urgent. The name didn't ring any bells. I had never heard it before, but the fact that my parents had chosen to involve this person in their secret departure made it feel like a bad omen. I opened the folder further, finding a few more documents that detailed the nature of the move. The name was Darius Holt. No other details were provided, just the name and a string of dates associated with the transaction. "Do you have any more information?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my efforts to sound composed. The woman behind the desk shook her head. "I'm sorry, but that's all I can provide. The relocation process was handled by him. They made it clear they wanted everything to be under the radar. That's why we couldn't disclose any details without verification." Verification. So this Darius Holt had been the one to handle their escape, the one they trusted to erase them from everything they had known. I felt the world tilt slightly, a dizzying rush of disbelief and confusion clouding my thoughts. I had expected answers, but this was something else entirely. Lucy's eyes met mine, and I could see the same realization dawning in her expression. "Who is he, Nora?" she asked again, more urgently this time. "We have to find out more." "I'll figure it out," I whispered, already slipping into survival mode. This was it, the moment when everything shifted. I wasn't just looking for my parents anymore, I was looking for the truth about what they had done, and Darius Holt was the key to that truth. We left the office with no more answers than we had entered with, but with a determination that was as sharp as a knife. The questions had only deepened, but now I had a name to search, a thread to pull. I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was hiding just beneath the surface of all of this, something that had forced my parents to leave behind their entire lives, to erase their past as if it had never existed. We spent the next few days combing through every source we could find. We searched online, but nothing substantial came up about Darius Holt. He had no social media presence, no business records. There were no traces of him outside the papers we had just found. It was as if he had no past at all. I knew something was off, but what could I do with so little to go on? Lucy kept her distance, retreating into herself, not wanting to face what was unfolding. I could feel her pulling away, the weight of everything becoming too much for her to handle, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't walk away. This was my family, and they had abandoned me with nothing but questions and shadows. I decided to dig deeper. I returned to the office where we had gotten the lead, hoping for something more. The same woman was still behind the desk, her expression neutral as I approached. "Is there any way I can get more information on Darius Holt?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the surge of desperation that threatened to consume me. The woman eyed me for a long moment, and I could tell she was debating whether to help me further. "I told you before," she said finally, her tone colder now. "We don't usually disclose that kind of information." "I know, but I'm his daughter," I said, the words coming out of my mouth before I could think better of it. "I'm just trying to understand why they left." The woman hesitated, her gaze flicking between me and the phone on her desk, clearly torn. After a few long seconds, she sighed, as if making a decision. "Listen," she said in a low voice, leaning forward, "I can't give you much, but there was something strange about that whole move. The request to keep it off the record, the urgency in their voices. It wasn't just about a relocation. They didn't just move for a job or retirement. There's more to this story than meets the eye." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I'm sorry," she said, shaking her head. "I can't go into it. But you should know that Darius Holt is not who he appears to be. There's something off about him. He has connections to people that you wouldn't want to cross." The warning was clear, and I felt a chill run through me. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing something sinister that had been lurking just below the surface all along. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling but determined. I didn't care what I had to face. I was going to find out what my parents had gotten themselves into, no matter the cost. As I walked out of the office, I knew one thing for sure. this was only the beginning, and what I was about to uncover would be more dangerous and more devastating than I could have ever imagined. The days following my visit to the office felt like a storm brewing, the kind of storm you can feel in the air before it actually hits. I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark and powerful was hovering just out of reach, and I was slowly being dragged toward it. Every time I thought I had control, the mystery deepened, and the more I uncovered, the more terrifying it became. I couldn't stop thinking about the warning the woman had given me. Darius Holt is not who he appears to be. Those words echoed in my mind, twisting and turning into 1,000 different possibilities. Who was he really? What connections did he have that were so dangerous? And why had my parents gotten involved with him? I needed answers, more than I had ever needed anything in my life. I dove headfirst into research, scouring every resource I could find. I went through old records, checked public databases, even reached out to old friends of my parents, hoping someone would have the missing piece to this puzzle. But it was like chasing shadows. The deeper I dug, the more the world around me seemed to close in. There were no records of Darius Holt in any legitimate business database, no trace of him in any public legal documents. But I found one lead, a set of strange court records from several years ago. They were sealed, but a name kept popping up in connection with them. Holt Enterprises. It sounded harmless enough, like a simple business name, but the fact that it was connected to a sealed court case made me uneasy. The more I dug into Holt Enterprises, the more I realized that it wasn't just a small, harmless company. It was linked to powerful, shadowy figures. People whose names were whispered about in hushed tones, but never fully acknowledged. People with resources, influence, and a knack for disappearing without a trace. And that's when I realized the most chilling part. Holt Enterprises wasn't just about relocation or moving families. It was a cover for something far more dangerous. I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. I needed someone who understood the kinds of people I was getting involved with, someone who could help me navigate this labyrinth of secrets. But Lucy was already too far gone, too overwhelmed to be of any help. She had withdrawn even further, refusing to talk about it or look deeper. The weight of this discovery was too much for her to bear, so I did the only thing I could do. I turned to someone else. I reached out to an old acquaintance of mine, a private investigator named Jack. He was someone I had known years ago through work, someone with experience in finding people who didn't want to be found. Jack was sharp, methodical, and had a reputation for digging up the things people desperately wanted to keep hidden. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but this situation was beyond anything I could handle on my own. He agreed to meet me the next day. When I walked into the cafe where we had arranged to meet, I spotted him immediately. Jack hadn't changed much since I last saw him. He was tall, with sharp features and dark eyes that always seemed to be calculating. He was sitting at a corner booth, sipping a coffee, his laptop open in front of him. "Nora," he said when he saw me. "It's been a while, how have you?" I took a seat across from him, my hands shaking slightly. I couldn't help it. This wasn't just a casual conversation. This was about my family, about uncovering a truth that might tear everything apart. "I'm not here for small talk," I said, my voice low. "I need your help. It's about my parents." Jack raised an eyebrow, sensing the gravity in my tone. "What's going on?" I explained everything. The strange move, the name Darius Holt, the sealed court records, and the connections I had uncovered. As I spoke, I could see the wheels turning in Jack's mind. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask unnecessary questions. He just listened, and when I finished, he closed his laptop and looked at me with a seriousness that made my heart skip a beat. "This isn't just some family dispute, is it?" he said, his voice steady. "This is deeper than you realize. You're talking about people who don't leave things to chance. If they wanted to disappear, they did it for a reason." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. I've never felt so powerless. I need to know what they're hiding, what they were running from." Jack leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "I can help you with that. But you need to understand something. This isn't going to be easy. People like Darius Holt, they don't just disappear without leaving a trail, they leave a message, and if you start following that trail, there's no going back. I met his gaze, determination hardening in my chest. I don't care. I need to know the truth. Whatever it takes. He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right. We'll start with Holt Enterprises. I'll see what I can dig up, but you need to be prepared for what we find. People like him, they don't like to be found. I felt a surge of hope, but also a deep sense of dread. This was the moment where I was no longer just trying to find my parents. I was about to uncover something that could change everything, and there was no turning back. Jack got to work immediately, pulling up every file he could find on Holt Enterprises and Darius Holt. As the hours passed, I stayed by his side, my eyes glued to the screen as he sifted through encrypted files and private records. Each discovery seemed to make the situation more complex, more dangerous. Then late into the evening, Jack found something. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen with a look of disbelief. Nora, he said quietly, I think I found something, but I need you to understand. It's not just your parents we're dealing with. I could feel my pulse quicken as I walked over to see what he had uncovered. My eyes scanned the document, and then it hit me like a punch to the gut. Holt Enterprises wasn't just a business, it was a front for something far darker, something that involved illegal activities and connections to powerful, corrupt figures. My parents had gotten tangled in something much larger than themselves, and the more I learned, the more I realized that the truth was far worse than I could have ever imagined. I stood frozen, staring at the screen, as Jack's words echoed in my head. The realization hit me like a tidal wave, crashing over everything I had once believed to be true. This wasn't just about a family leaving without saying goodbye. It wasn't just about my parents disappearing. This was about a deeper, darker truth that I was only beginning to scratch the surface of. Holt Enterprises was no small-time operation. It was tied to a network of people with influence, with power and with resources that could erase anyone who stood in their way. My parents hadn't just moved across the country to retire or start over. They had been running from something they had gotten involved in, something far more dangerous than I could have imagined. I turned to Jack, my voice barely above a whisper. What is this? What have they gotten themselves into? Jack's eyes were grim as he scanned the doc. These connections go back years, Nora. Your parents were involved in something much bigger than just a relocation. Holt Enterprises is a front for money laundering, black market dealings, and a whole lot of shady business. And Darius Holt, he's not just some mover or business. He's linked to some of the most dangerous people in the country. The words felt like they were sinking into me, each one heavier than the last. I had always thought of my parents as ordinary people, living ordinary lives. They had their faults, yes, but they were my parents. They had always been there, always in the background, steady and dependable. But now it felt like everything I had known about them was a lie. Why didn't they tell me? I whispered, almost pleading with the air around me. Why didn't they trust me with the truth? Jack didn't respond right away. He was too busy piecing together the fragmented information on the screen. I could see his mind working, calculating, trying to connect the dots between my parents' sudden move and the web of corruption they had gotten caught. They didn't trust anyone, Jack said after a long pause, and they had a damn good reason. The people behind Holt Enterprises, they don't just deal with money, they deal with power. And if your parents got too close to whatever was going on, well, they could have been in real danger. This wasn't a simple move, Nora. This was an escape, a forced one. I felt a cold chill sweep over me. An escape, forced. My parents hadn't just decided to leave their lives behind on a whim. They had been running for their lives, hiding from people who had the means and the motive to destroy everything they had built. But why hadn't they told me? Why hadn't they reached out for help? I didn't get a chance to ask Jack any more questions. The phone rang, cutting through the silence like a knife. My stomach dropped when I saw the number on the screen. It was Lucy. I hadn't heard from her in days, and I had no idea what she was going to say, but I had a feeling it wouldn't be good. Lucy, I answered quickly, my voice tight with a mix of fear and anticipation. Nora, she said, her voice shaky, I need you to listen to me. I think someone's watching me. My heart stopped, What do you mean, what's going on? I don't know, she said, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but there are these cars parked outside my place. They've been there for hours, and I saw someone watching me through my window. Panic surged through me. Lucy, you need to leave. Get somewhere safe now. Don't stay there. I'll come to you. No, she replied, her voice trembling. I can't. I don't know who to trust anymore, Nora. I don't know what's happening, but I think it's connected to what you've been looking into. I think they know we're asking questions. I don't know who they are, but I'm scared. My chest tightened as I looked over at Jack. He was already packing up his things, his face serious as he gave me a look that said it all. This was getting worse. Lucy, listen to me, I said urgently. You need to leave right now. Go to a friend's house or a hotel. Anywhere but there. I'll be there as soon as I can. She didn't respond right away. I could hear the fear in her silence. Okay, she finally whispered. I'll go. I'll be safe. But Nora, I think we're in deeper than we realize. We have to stop digging. We don't know who we're dealing with. The line went dead and I stood there, my breath shallow, my thoughts spinning in 1,000 different directions. The danger wasn't just theoretical anymore. Lucy was in danger, my family was in danger, and the more I uncovered, the more I realized that the web we had gotten tangled in was far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. Jack grabbed his bag and turned to me. We need to go, now. If they know about Lucy, they know about you too. I nodded, my mind raced. My parents had been running from these people, and now Lucy and I were running too. There was no turning back. We couldn't stop now. The truth was out there, and it was darker than I had ever imagined, and as much as I wanted to walk away, I knew I couldn't, not when my family was involved, not when I was the only one who could find out what had happened. But as we raced toward Lucy's apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to walk into a trap set by people who had no mercy, and no hesitation in wiping out anyone who stood in their way. The stakes had never been higher, and I was beginning to realize just how deep the shadows went. By the time we arrived at Lucy's apartment, the darkness had settled in. The streetlights flickered in the cool night air, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out toward us, warning us to stay away. I parked the car a block away, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Jack was in the passenger seat, his eyes scanning the area around us, with the vigilance of someone who knew what it was like to be hunted. This is bad, Jack muttered under his breath, more to himself than to me. They're on to us, Nora. I don't know how, but they are. I could feel the weight of his words sinking in. We were no longer dealing with just an abandoned house or a sudden disappearance. The people my parents had been running from, these mysterious figures behind Holt Enterprises, had tracked us down, and now they were closing in. I got out of the car, my heart pounding in my chest, and made my way cautiously to Lucy's building. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting someone to be watching, following us. Every corner felt like an ambush waiting to happen. I tried to push the fear aside, focusing on getting to Lucy before anything happened to her. Jack stayed a few steps behind me, his posture tense as he kept a sharp eye on the surroundings. We made our way to the door of Lucy's apartment building, and I knocked 3 times, each thud on the door echoing too loudly in the stillness. Lucy didn't answer immediately. I pressed my ear to the door, but the only sound I heard was the thumping of my own heart in my chest. Lucy? I called softly. It's me. Open the door. A few tense seconds passed before I heard the shuffle of feet, and then the door creaked open just a crack. Lucy's face appeared, pale and wide-eyed, her hand gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing holding her up. Are they gone? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, I said, but we need to get out of here, right now. Jack stepped forward looking around, his gaze landing on the cars parked down the street. Someone's still watching, he muttered. We can't stay here. Lucy stepped aside, letting us in, and I quickly scanned the room. It was small, modest, but the cluttered feeling of it made it feel even more oppressive. A few things were scattered on the coffee table, the evidence of her trying to prepare for a night in, but it was clear that she hadn't been expecting company. I closed the door behind me, locking it tightly. I don't know who they are, I said, my voice strained. But I feel like we're running out of time. Whatever they were hiding from, it's bigger than just us. We have to keep moving. Lucy sat down on the couch, her eyes darting nervously around the room. I'm scared, Nora, she admitted, her voice small. I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know what's real. I knelt down beside her, placing my hand on hers. We'll figure it out, I promise. But we can't back down now. As I looked at my sister, I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of the truth pressing down on her shoulders. She had never been one to back down from anything. But this was something none of us were prepared for. I had to keep pushing forward for her, for me, for our parents. The phone on the table buzzed, interrupting the silence. I glanced at it, my stomach dropping as I saw the number flashing across the screen. It was from an unlisted number. A part of me wanted to ignore it, but I couldn't. I picked up the phone, pressing it to my ear. Hello? There was a long pause, followed by the soft click of someone breathing on the other end. My heart pounded harder with each passing second. Are you looking for answers, Nora? The voice asked, smooth and unsettling. It was deep, cold, and somehow familiar, like I should know it but couldn't place it. Because I have them. But if you're looking for your parents, you may want to rethink your little investigation. The words felt like ice in my veins. But I didn't flinch. Who is this? I demanded. Darius Holt, the voice replied simply. And I suggest you stop asking questions if you want to keep your family intact. I felt the room close in on me. My mind spun. Darius Holt, the same man whose name had haunted every document I had uncovered, whose name was connected to everything I now feared. He was real, and he was watching us. The line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone slipping from my hand and landing on the floor with a dull thud. My pulse was in my throat, my mind reeling with the implications of his words. The man I had been searching for, the one I thought I could find in the shadows, had found us first. We're in danger, aren't we? Lucy whispered, her eyes wide, her voice cracking as the realization settled in. I nodded, the weight of the truth crashing down on me. Yes, and I think we just made a mistake by getting too close. Jack's voice was low, his eyes scanning the windows, the door, every corner of the room. They're going to come for you. They'll stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden. We have to get ahead of them, I said, my voice hardening. We need to find my parents, and we need to do it before they realize we're not backing down. Lucy's hands shook as she clenched her fists, trying to summon some courage. But where do we even start? We're out of leads. We don't know anything more than we did before. I turned to Jack, my mind racing with possibilities. Do you know anyone who could help us? Someone who can dig deeper into Holt Enterprises? Jack didn't answer right away. He was calculating, looking at me like he was weighing something, whether he should tell me or not. Finally he sighed as if resigning himself to the fact that there was no turning back now. There's someone who might be able to help, Jack said. But he's dangerous, and if you want his help, we're going to have to take some risks. The room grew colder, the tension so thick I could almost taste it. We were no longer just looking for my parents. We were stepping into a world of dangerous people who wouldn't hesitate to do whatever it took to keep their secrets buried. But I had no choice. We had no choice. The next step in this twisted game was about to begin, and I had no idea what the cost of that step would be, but I was willing to pay it. The sun had barely risen the next day, but the world already felt heavier. We were no longer just a family trying to get by. Now we were entangled in a web so dangerous, so deep that I wasn't sure where the truth ended and the lies began. Every decision from here on out would come with consequences. I could feel it in my bones. We had made our choice. Jack's contact, someone dangerous, was our only hope for uncovering the truth. I wasn't sure what we would find, but I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about finding my parents anymore. It was about surviving. I sat in the back of Jack's car, the city flashing by outside the window. Lucy was silent beside me, her gaze fixed on the passing streets, her lips tight with anxiety. She had agreed to this plan, but I could see in her eyes that the fear was eating away at her. She hadn't signed up for any of this, and yet, here we were, heading toward a meeting with a man who could either give us answers or bury us even deeper in the hole we had dug. Jack's contact, a man named Victor Solano, had a reputation. From what Jack had told me, Victor was known for dealing with people who didn't want to be found. He had connections, information, everything we needed, but nothing came without a price, and I wasn't sure I was ready to pay that price. The car stopped in front of a run-down building in the industrial district. It was a place that seemed abandoned by the world, a fitting home for someone who made deals in the shadows. We stepped out of the car, the silence between us thick with anticipation and fear. Victor Solano's office was in the back of the building. The air was stale, and the floors creaked beneath our feet as we walked toward the door. Jack knocked twice, his knuckles tapping sharply on the wooden frame. After a long pause, the door swung open, revealing a man sitting behind a desk, his face half hidden in the shadow. Victor Solano was older than I had imagined, with a sharp, calculating look in his eyes. His hair was graying, his suit well-tailored but worn. He didn't rise to greet us, but instead motioned for us to sit down. "Jack," he said, his voice deep, low, almost a whisper. "I'm surprised to see you again." Jack didn't answer, but his body language told me everything I needed to know. There was no love lost between them. "We need your help," I said, cutting through the tension. "We're looking for my parents. They disappeared without a trace. We've already found out some things that shouldn't have been hidden, but we don't know who we're dealing with. We need to know what's going on." Victor leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. His gaze was piercing, unnerving, like he could see right through me. "You're in over your head, Nora," he said slowly. "Whatever your parents were involved in, it's bigger than you think, and if you want to find them, you're going to have to make a choice." "A choice?" I repeated, my heart pounding. "What do you mean?" He smiled, but it wasn't a reassuring smile. It was the kind of smile a predator gives its prey right before it strikes. "There are people who don't want you to find out the truth," he said, his voice cold. "People who will stop at nothing to make sure this stays bare. And those people are connected to Holt Enterprises. They're dangerous. If you want to get to them, you'll need to make a deal." "A deal with me?" I froze. "What kind of deal?" Victor leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepling in front of his face. "I can give you information. I can help you track down your parents. But in return, I need something. There's a job I need done. A job that requires someone with your particular set of skills." I felt my stomach turn. I had no idea what he was asking, but I knew it wouldn't be good. "What kind of job?" Victor's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he might refuse to answer, but then, slowly he spoke. "There's someone I need taken care of. Someone who's standing in the way of a much larger operation. If you want the information you're after, you'll have to do this job, and when it's done, you'll get what you came for." My mind spun. This was the moment where everything changed. This was the point where we crossed the line from just looking for answers to becoming a part of something much darker than I could have imagined. I looked at Jack, who was watching me closely, waiting for my decision. I could see the weight of it on his face. He knew what this meant. He knew what kind of danger I was stepping into. Victor's smile deepened, sensing my hesitation. "It's your choice, Nora, but remember, the truth comes at a cost, and once you step into this world, there's no going back." I knew what I had to do. I had no choice but to take the deal. I couldn't walk away now, not with my parents still missing, not when the truth was so close. I had come too far to turn back. "I'll do it," I said, my voice steady despite the fear that churned inside me. "I'll take the job." Victor nodded, a satisfied gleam in his eyes. "Good. We'll make the arrangements." The room seemed to shrink as the weight of my decision settled over me. I had just crossed a line, and there was no turning back. Whatever I was about to do, whatever I was about to become, it would change everything. But I wasn't going to let fear stop me, not when my family's lives were on the line. Jack gave me a hard look, but he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. We both knew what had to be done. As we left the building, the air felt thicker than it had before. The weight of the decision I had just made pressed down on me, but I refused to show it. I was in this now. There was no going back. Chapter 10. The final reveal. The job was done. It had taken weeks of planning, of maneuvering, of walking a razor-thin line between survival and destruction, but it was done. The person who had been standing in the way of everything we were trying to uncover was gone, silenced for good, and now, the truth was mine to claim. Jack and I stood at the edge of a quiet lake, the early morning mist curling around the water like a ghost. The air was still, but there was a tension in it, a kind of stillness that made me feel like everything was about to break wide open. "I'm sorry, Nora," Jack said quietly, "but we didn't have any other choice." I nodded. There was no point in dwelling on the past. What had been done was done. What mattered now was the truth. The phone in my pocket buzzed, breaking the silence. I pulled it out, my heart racing as I saw the name on the screen. It was the one I had been waiting for. I answered without hesitation. "Hello, Nora," the voice on the other end said. "You've been asking questions, and you're getting too close. We have your parents, but if you want them back, you'll need to stop looking, stop digging." I froze. They had my parents, but there was a twist. A moment of clarity flooded my mind. They had always been the ones in control. They had always known how to make me come to them. "You're too late," I said, my voice steady cold. "I know everything now, and if you want them, you'll have to come through me." The line went silent. Then, slowly, I heard the sound of someone hanging up, and just like that, I knew the game was over. We had won. As the phone call ended, a sense of finality settled over me. The silence that followed felt heavy, like the calm before the storm. My parents were still alive, and I had the power to get them back. But this victory wasn't without its price. It had come at the cost of things I couldn't undo, the choices I had made, the alliances I had formed. They were irreversible, and in that moment, I realized something. The journey I had taken wasn't just about finding my parents. It was about discovering who I was, what I was capable of, and how far I was willing to go to protect the people I loved. The truth was dark. The people I had crossed were dangerous, and I would never be the same after all this. But in the end, I had learned one powerful lesson. Sometimes you have to walk through hell to find the light. As Jack and I walked away from the lake, our steps heavy, the weight of what we had just uncovered pressing down on us, I knew that I wasn't done yet. There were still pieces of this puzzle left to solve, and this story was far from over. That's it for now. The truth has been revealed, and the story has twisted in ways I could never have imagined. My parents are still out there, and while I've learned things I never thought I'd know, I can't stop now. There's more to uncover, more secrets buried deep beneath the surface, and the danger isn't over. If you've been with me through all the twists, the betrayals and the mysteries, then you know this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. There are still answers to be found, and I'll be right here, fighting through the shadows. You won't want to miss what's next. If you've been hooked by my story, if you want to know where this journey goes next, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think, what you expect to happen next. Your thoughts mean everything. I'll see you in the next chapter. Stay tuned, because in my world, the truth is never what it seems.